Yo, what's up guys? Inswain with Inswain Audio. Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, where have you been, man? Make sure to subscribe and join the family. We missed you. Welcome, welcome. Today, I'm going to be talking about the mixing philosophy, how to mix a vocal. If you can understand this and you can understand the tools, you can apply this to any instrument slash vocal, to any song, add your flair to it, and you now know how to mix. And this is not an exaggeration. Anyways, let's jump into it. All right, so the mixing philosophy. I did not create this idea, but I did stumble upon it on my own throughout, my years, and then saw other people talking about it and how they do it, and it kind of reaffirmed what I believed. So if you already do this, hopefully I can, reaffirm what you believe. If you don't already do it, maybe you can try to adapt this into your mixing and it'll improve your game for you. What is that? The mixing philosophy is breaking it down into two steps, and they go in order. The first step is problem solving. The second step is enhancing. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean, first, you remove the problems and correct and fix what's wrong with the vocal or any instrument for that matter. And then you enhance, get creative, add to, create from what's left of the vocal or instrument. Now, why would you do this? Because, for example, let's say we want to EQ a vocal and reverb a vocal. It would make sense to EQ it first and remove the frequencies that we don't want, remove those bad frequencies before adding the reverb, because then when we add the reverb, it's only going to reverberate what's left of the vocal, which is what you decided was desirable. Now, if you switch the order around and you reverb the vocal first and then remove the bad frequencies, you need to remove the bad frequencies from the vocal and the reverb. So it just doesn't make sense. It's going to give you a worse result in most cases, and it's also going to be more work and take more time. Now, this is just an example. Of course, you can add EQs after your reverb. I actually, do that and recommend generally that to be done. That's a different story. That was just an example and a way to get your mind to start kind of thinking about the problem solving first and then the enhancing. Now, when we're talking about mixing vocals, what falls under the category of problem solving and what falls under the category of enhancing? I'm going to tell you that now. Keep in mind that these are in no specific order. It's going to change every time. The only thing that matters is that you're doing the problem solving first and the enhancing second. Within those categories, which order you do it, I'm not necessarily saying in this video what to do it in. It doesn't necessarily matter. Of course, it's going to have a different effect and it does matter, but that's not the point that we're talking about here. The only thing that matters is you're doing the problem solving first and the enhancing second. And another thing to remember is I'm going to give you like an all-encompassing list here of what is under the problem solving and generally what is under the enhancing, but you don't always need to do all of them. Sometimes a vocal only needs some, sometimes it needs all, and it just depends. So you got to use your ear and you got to know what you're going for. Anyways, enough of that. What falls under the category of problem solving when mixing a vocal? The first thing and the most common thing is corrective EQ. Removing bad frequencies, just correcting a recording, right? Making it sound acceptable. Generally, this is done with a parametric EQ, and generally it's mostly reductive, like reducing frequencies, although not always. You can use any kind of EQ, and sometimes you do need to boost frequencies, right? If there's a area lacking in a recording that needs to be, boosted first before we can get to that baseline, that's totally normal and totally okay. But generally speaking, and more commonly, it is reducing frequencies that are harmful. Nasaliness, boxiness, boominess, things like that, muddiness. Another thing that is done in the stage to a vocal is compression. Now, when I say compression, in this stage, I mean for its actual use to compress the dynamic range, to give you a more steady vocal level. Now, of course, compression can be used in our next stage that I'm going to be talking about to add color to the vocal and used as a vibe. But in this step, I'm talking about, the typical use of compression to reduce the dynamic range. Basically, I think of it as we're fixing the problem of a too dynamic vocal. Another thing that might be done is tuning, right? Fixing pitch, right? We're fixing things in these steps. In this case, we would be fixing pitch. Of course, tuning can also be a creative and stylistic choice, and you would probably want to put it in this earlier stage here still. But What I'm talking about here is using tuning to fix pitch. Now, once again, not every vocal needs these things. Not every vocal is going to need pitch correction or going to desire pitch correction, but if you were to apply it and when you do, it would go in these earlier stages. Finally, we have things like editing, de-essing, de-plosive, de-mouth click, right? D whatever, and editing. This is kind of removing artifacts within the recording, and then de-essing is similar. This is the stage where you would want to clean up the recording by de-essing, de-noising, whatever you need, whatever is needed. These are the things that are generally done in this first step of our mixing philosophy, the problem solving stage. Once again, you don't need to do all of these. Not every vocal is going to need tuning. Not every vocal is going to need, de-plosives. It all depends. So use your ears. This is kind of just like what is generally done if it needs it all, but not every vocal is going to need all of these. Moving on to the second half of mixing. And honestly, this is kind of where the mixing really begins. The first step is a lot of fixing problems, boring housekeeping stuff, like setting up your project, labeling things, editing, tuning, right? These things can be kind of boring and not really creative, but we do that first to not only get it out of the way, but to get to this baseline vocal, because when we're moving into this second phase here of mixing the vocal, we're going to have a very boring and not exciting vocal, but that's okay. That is the goal. That's what we want. We don't want it to be, harsh. We don't want it to be offensive. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get a baseline boring vocal that just sounds flat and bland, but there's no problems with it. It doesn't have plosives. It doesn't have S's. It's not out of tune. It's not exciting yet, but we got a flat, blank canvas, so to speak, to work with. This is when we move into our second phase, our enhancing stage. Now we can start taking what's left of the vocal, the things that we don't find offensive, what we left in is desirable, and we can squeeze the most life out of it, so to speak. We can enhance it and shape it and mold it in ways whatever we want. And this is why this second stage is where I feel like you really begin mixing and get creative. So one thing that might be done here, once again, is EQ. This time it's generally colorful EQ, which is generally done with analog EQs or analog emulated EQs. But once again, it doesn't need to be. And it's also typically boosting and broadband. But neither of these things need to be that way. You can still be reductive color EQing. You can boost with narrow bands. There's no rules, but I'm just giving you generally, it's analog EQ with broad boosts. Another thing, in the same vein, it's a different tool and it processes differently, but we, in this stage, kind of use it to achieve a similar result, or at least go into it with the same intent. And this is saturation. Adding harmonic frequency content to the vocal to make it more exciting, to make it more warm, bright, any of these, words that we always chase after, crisp. We can shape the vocal with saturation at this stage to get it to, fit the vibe and the feel that we want to. In the same vein is compression. Earlier, I mentioned compression for the straightforward use of compressing the dynamic range, but here we can use it for vibe and character. This is where more analog emulation compressors will come out. They have a lot of feel and character. They might make the vocal thicker. Of course, we're going to be compressing, but at this stage, it's more so for vibe and for feel. Reverb. This is where we might add our reverbs. Once we get the vocal to sound, where we want it to, we can then add reverb so that it's a good sounding vocal that's creating reverberations instead of a not so great sounding vocal causing reverberations, because those things that aren't so great are also going to reverberate, and that is not what we want. In the same vein and with the same mindset is delay. Delay and reverb are kind of the exact same thing. They're just on a spectrum, reverb at one end, delay on the other. That's another conversation. They can be used differently and they are different, but you can go in with the same mindset of once you have a cleaned up vocal that's sounding good, then you can add delays, because you don't want that terrible muffly sounded vocal to cause delays and be echoing and repeating. We want a good vocal to echo and repeat so that those repetitions sound good. You can also add effects in this stage. This is more so on a case-by-case basis and less common than the other things I mentioned, but things like distortion, flanger, phaser, chorus, any sort of modulation, things like that, more creative and one-off effects. You would want to clean the vocal up first, because we don't want that terrible muffle-sounded vocal to have a chorus effect. We just want that good vocal to have that chorus effect. And of course, there's many more things that can be done in these stages, but these are what's generally done. I just wanted to give you guys a rough idea. The point of this, though, was to get you into the mindset of problem solving first, then enhancing, and think about what would go in each stage and what order you might want to do things in, because you probably are using these tools, most of, if not all of them, depending on the song. But what order are you doing them in can have a drastic difference on the result of your mix. And I believe that if you problem solve first and then enhance after what's left, you'll get a much cleaner and better result. And it'll also be much quicker and save you a lot of time. And let's be honest, we could all mix faster. I've never heard anyone complain that mixing is too easy and they do it too fast. So hopefully this helps you guys. If you feel like I forgot something, let me know in the comments. This is a kind of a broad topic, so I definitely could have missed some things. I already feel like I did, but let me know. Hopefully this helped you. Anyways, my name is Inswain with Inswain Audio. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, share, name your firstborn child after me. I would really appreciate it. Till the next one, guys. Peace.